What's good? What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Urban Platform Speaks. Make sure to like and subscribe as you come in to the channel and you check out the content. And with that being said, man, I want to speak about the picture and the narrative that's being painted around LeBron James. Right now, it's a lot of it is a narrative that LeBron James has earned, but I just want to say that, like from the beginning, like Michael Jordan said years ago, it was Michael Jordan and Charles Barkley was on the Oprah Winfrey show. So you know this was a long time ago. But Michael Jordan, and he wasn't. He wasn't. I'm not even sure if LeBron James was even in the league then. I don't think he was. But Michael Jordan said that if you take a young player or a young person and you give them everything without having them earn anything, then you can't expect to get their best effort, right? Because there's no incentive for anybody to earn and for them to earn anything because you're giving it to them. They don't, they're not going to work for it if you're just going to give it to them anyway. They don't have to, right? And I think when Michael Jordan said this, he was talking about NBA contracts and how young people was coming into the league. Young players were coming into the league, and they were expecting these big shoe deals and big contracts like that, right? And he was speaking towards that. And so now this was years even before LeBron James came into the league. So everybody knows that when you bring a person in, and so it was expected that when they brought LeBron James in and they crowned him king, King James, and he's going to be the face of the league. There was really no incentive for LeBron James to work because everything was already given to him. So this monster that was created was basically, I think, in my opinion, I think it was created on purpose. And so now you fast forward to like 20 something years later in LeBron James's career. Now everybody is saying that he is the face of cowardice. He's a quitter because he always wanted to play on a team, with other superstars and take the easier route, and so I think, like I said, I just think that it was all a setup. This was a script that was mapped out. LeBron James fell into this trap, and I'm not even a LeBron James fan. I'm not a LeBron James apologist or anything like that. But I just think that when you put people in certain situations, you can kind of predict what their reaction is going to be or how they're going to handle this, especially a young person that's not experienced, that don't have any idea what they're dealing with, right? Don't have any worldly knowledge or worldly wisdom. You can kind of predict what's going to happen. So I came across a video by the guy Scap, and this was a video he made a while ago, but it's titled "The Coward's Way," right? A complete history. And he basically says that LeBron James always took the cowardly approach to basketball as opposed to how everybody else did it throughout history. So let me play this, right? Because even before I play it, remember, somebody made the point that GMs, owners used to make the same decisions as what LeBron James was making. Like they try to load their team. So when a player do it, it's a whole different it's a whole different story when a player do it as opposed to when GMs do it, right? But and that just to me just makes it seem more like it was a setup. Give LeBron James all this power, player empowerment, and allow him the freedom to move from team to team and all this stuff. I just think it all was a setup, and that was a script, right? And so let's listen to what Scap had to say about LeBron James and how he fit into the history of basketball as far as being, a coward.
There have been countless dynastic teams which have reigned supreme throughout the course of NBA history, dating back to the earliest beginnings of the NBA in the 1950s and working through virtually every decade all the way up to modern history. During that time, teams have been built through the draft, and by cultivating their talent, or by adding pieces in free agency. However team building occurred in the past, that all came to an abrupt and declarative end on July 8th, 2010, when after weeks of speculation, LeBron James sat down in a Boys and Girls Club in Greenwich, Connecticut for a 75-minute special.
What?
Yes, you heard that correctly. The epic cringe fest hosted by Jim Gray lasted an impossible to believe 75 minutes. And nearly 30 minutes into that show, at 9:28 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, LeBron James lit a match that would burn the NBA to the ground.
In this fall, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach.
For virtually the entire decade that would follow. A decade marked by player empowerment, mass player movement, collusion, and super team building that quite frankly destroyed the competitive balance of the entire sport. And it is important to note that a great team does not necessarily constitute a super team. We have seen countless great teams throughout NBA history, the earliest example of which produced the greatest dynasty ever, the 1960s Boston Celtics, who captured 11 of 13 NBA championships behind a plethora of Hall of Fame players such as Bill Russell, Bob Cousy, Tom Heinsohn, Sam Jones, and Casey Jones. Yes, make no mistake, the Celtics of this era were stacked. But every single one of these players were drafted by the Boston Celtics. This team was built and grown organically.
So look, all right, now that's true. The way that they built those teams back then was different, right? I wouldn't go so far as to call it organic, because even back then, Red Auerbach, he had to bend the rules and do some skirting of the rules in order to gain some of those ball players. And things was different, right? But history looks on that differently because he was Red Auerbach and he was part of management, right? And so now player empowerment come along with LeBron James, and LeBron James, he's done some things that usually were reserved for management to do, right? And when things go sideways, if you're a manager and plans don't work out, then you just get fired. And history really don't reflect on you too hard because you mostly behind the scenes. Like people remember Red Auerbach, right? Because he was a great GM. People remember Jerry West. Jerry West was also a great GM, right? But just imagine like all the other GMs and who have came before or played or who was in the league along with Red Auerbach or Jerry West, who didn't have the success. Like those guys are hardly ever remembered. So now comes LeBron James, and he's like a Red Auerbach and a Jerry West in himself. Like he gets to move around, he gets to say like what players he want to play with and all this other stuff. Now, if LeBron James had won, 10 championships, then I think when you're LeBron James, you almost had to hit a home run and knock it out of the park. When you start doing stuff like that, because if it don't work, which it didn't work, most of the time, now you're going to be the face of, a guy who didn't want to compete, a guy who was the king of the quitters and the coward and all this stuff. Like this is what the league put him in a position to take the fall for everything that went wrong during his era in basketball. And he definitely started a trend, like he and LeBron James not the only one. You had Kevin Durant moved around, who else? James Harden moved around. Whereas though player movement would have been restricted more so back in the day than it was when in this era, like in eras before, player movement was more so restricted, right? And that was reserved for like if the GM or the coach or somebody who had authority wanted to move you, then they would move you. But yeah, I just think that this whole thing, in my opinion, is just it was all basically it was scripted. right? Because when we talk about LeBron James, we don't even talk about like his basketball prowess. We don't talk about spectacular plays or spectacular moments that we gave LeBron James like we do Kobe. Like we remember, plays when we talk about Larry Bird. They show highlights and plays of Larry Bird getting big steals or hitting big baskets or making big passes. You know what I mean? Not the same with LeBron James, man. So his situation is all different. He had that one chase down block where he blocked the shot of Andre Iguodala, right? But other than that, you don't really have any big plays where LeBron James is letting the clock wind down and then he just go ahead and hit the shot to just break somebody's heart and send them home. You don't have those type of moments. So how else can the league benefit from a guy who never felt the need to put his all into basketball because everything was already given to him when he was a teenager? You use him as a somebody who is very polarizing. You use him for clicks and views. You use him to generate attention, and that's what LeBron James is, man. Like I think, in my opinion, like I said, not really letting LeBron James off the hook for not playing hard or for flopping or for doing what was it player when the guy just take off days unnecessarily, right? Load managing. I just think that like LeBron James, in my opinion, if the rules were different, if the rules had stayed the same, then there was no opportunity for LeBron James to flop. There would have been no opportunity for LeBron James to load manage. Like when you think of I think Michael Jordan played 82 games, nine out of his 15 years in the league, and the rest of those he played close to 80 games. So every time that Michael Jordan could play, just about every year he played damn near every game. So he wasn't missing no games. And he's not the only one. Like it just was like, if that was the thing, if you were healthy, you gonna play. And so that was not even a question, right? So they changed the rules, or they lightened up on some of the rules and restrictions, and they allowed LeBron James to do basically what he wanted to do. And now LeBron James is getting fed to the media cycle, right? To that media machine. All these different platforms, are holding LeBron James hostage for ruining the basketball, for ruining the NBA. When I've told people that there's no way that the NBA is going to let somebody ruin the NBA. You're talking about multi-billions and billions of dollars. There's no way in the world one player can, not Michael Jordan, not Kobe Bryant, not Larry Bird, not LeBron James. So, no way. And I used an example of somebody said that Ja Morant could have been, we was having a discussion. They said Ja Morant could have been the face of the league, right? But Ja Morant riding around in a car with one of his little friends, and his friend, take a picture of Ja Morant flashing, flashing a weapon, right? And I said, look, can't no young dude from the hood mess up with the league. If the league had wanted Ja Morant to be the face of the league, this dude with a rusty pistol could not have thrown a wrench in that. It just wouldn't happen. You're talking about billions and billions of dollars. They're not going to let some dude with a rusty pistol mess that up for them. So just like they would not have allowed, LeBron James to destroy the league or ruin the league like people think. That's why I just think that this player empowerment thing was all a script. It was all a script. LeBron James was the star in that script. He didn't know that for him it was going to come to a tragic ending, which I think it is, because he's not going to go down in history the way he wanted to go down in history. He's going to go down as somebody who was polarizing, and they're going to call him the king of all quitters, and king of the cowards and all this other stuff, man. So that's my take on it. Make sure to like, subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to leave a comment. And with that being said, I'm going to check you all out in the next video. Peace.